Welcome again to another great chapter in Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle, brought to you from beautiful downtown planet Earth. And I am your host, Mushtaq Ali Al-Ansari, and
sorry, Nor Kyle. Yep, that's me.
Who is also your host. But
letting Zainab into the group.
Yeah. Hello, Zainab.
Hello, everyone.
And perfect timing, we have just started. So, at the moment, given that daylight savings time is no longer over, I think we have all agreed that we are going to start a half an hour earlier to make it easier for people who are not in the Pacific time zone to do what we're doing. So next week it will be at 6:30 instead of 7 o'clock. Even if I say that it's going to be at 7 o'clock, it's going to be at 6:30. So don't listen to me unless I tell you that it's 6:30. And the topic for the evening is meditation. And meditation is an interesting thing because it is an Indo-European word that comes from the Latin and has no connection to the kind of things that they talk about that we call meditation from the East in a lot of cases. And so I want to see if we can disambiguate the term a little bit and talk about the kind of meditations that we do here at the school, which are very specific. And there are three kinds of meditations that we do. So meditation, the word comes from the root med, which is Proto-Indo-European. And it basically means the right amount or just enough. And the root gives us meditation, medicine, medicate, all of these sorts of things. It entered into English probably around the 13th or 14th century. And it means, it has meant continuous calm thought on some subject, or to plan, to devise, to practice, to rehearse, to study. I'm reading from an entry in the Internet Etymological Dictionary, which I like a lot. And it can mean reflect, consider, think over. And none of these definitions are what I mean when I say meditation, interestingly enough. And we've talked about meditation before. We've talked about the Sufi term for meditation, muraqabeh, and muhasabeh, which is meditating and taking account. But rather than getting into those, tonight we're going to talk about the origin for most of the Eastern terms for meditation, which comes from the Sanskrit, which has touched on both the Chinese and the Japanese terms for meditation. So we run across in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, in the second chapter, the Samadhi Pada, they talk about the 8 limbs of yoga. And we are going to look at the last 3 limbs. Well, we'll even look at the last 4 limbs. Yeah, it's yama, niyama, which are outward devotional things, inward devotional things. Asana, which is sitting, pranayama, which is breath practice, which is the bridge between the outer and the inner. Then you have pratyahara, which is concentration, withdrawal of the senses, actually. Then dhrana, which is concentration on a single point, and dhyana, which is meditative absorption, is how it's usually translated. It is when the entire perceptual flow becomes aligned with the given. And then you have samadhi, which is usually not understood as a practice, though Patanjali meant it as a practice. Samadhi is as much of a practice as dhyana or dhrana. And he then goes on to state that the three together create the samyama, the great practice. And the word that we usually translate as meditation in Sanskrit is dhyana. Now this word comes from dhyan, which means to become absorbed. And it gives us the Chinese word chan, as in Chan Buddhism, and the Japanese word Zen, as in Zen Buddhism, dhyan to Zen. All the same word, means the same thing. And the practices for each of these is very, very similar. You following me so far? It all kind of makes sense? So, you have two things that are almost diametrically opposed. Dhrana, which is concentration upon a single point or upon something deep. This all requires withdrawal of the senses from objects of their fascination. But we see this in the practices of the circle, in the meditation of the diagram. Y'all remember that little 8-pointed star thingy? Mm-hmm. That would be a medicine or a meditation that is focusing. It creates what's called convergent thought. All of your awareness converges on one point and spends its time playing there. And it produces, convergent meditation produces creative thought, but creative thought in the areas of like rational thought. Your rational thought becomes very, very clear with this kind of meditation. It strengthens it. So your logic gets better. Your ability to see connections between things that are related gets better. So if you were to do an hour's worth of the diagram meditation and then start working logical syllogisms, they would come much easier. So you could even though right brain, left brain is not what most people think it is, you could say that this would be the meditations for the left brain. Now, dhyana is opposite of that. We understand, Zen Buddhism, Zen meditation is just sitting. The dhyana meditation gives you a broad focus rather than a sharp focus. The dhrana style meditations are very sharp focused. It's like taking a needle and sticking it right into the heart of something. Whereas the dhyana meditations are wide open. An example of that in our practices is the void practice. The void practice is this sort, and this is for creating an entire different kind of creative thought. This is taking disparate things and bringing them together, finding the connections in them. Now, when you combine these two, it creates what I call what Patanjali calls samadhi, and I call samadhi integrative flow. And it is a balance between these two states that allows you to get into a flow state. And it does very interesting things with your brain when this happens. Now, there is a lot of meditation that is not this, that are not these things that we call meditation. For example, I'm going to pick on the transcendental meditation guys. They're not here to defend themselves, so it's fairly safe to do that. Now, transcendental meditation, as taught by the old Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, is taking a seed sound, the Biji mantra, and repeating it over and over and over again. And this is not like, going Om Mani Padme Hum or anything like that. These little sounds come from Vedic literature. Some of them relate to chakras, some of them relate to other things. And when you do this, what you produce is a form of auto-hypnosis. This kind of mantra yoga puts you in a trance. Nothing wrong with that. Trances are good. We like trances. They're very enjoyable. But they are not what I consider meditation. They don't produce the same effects. Nope, that ain't me. Yep, don't know. There could be mice in the computer. That's my theory. So, where was I? Oh yes, the idea of auto-hypnosis, going into trance through the repetition of a mantra. This will lower your blood pressure. It will sometimes give you interesting visions, but it doesn't make you more awake. And what we're interested in here is being more awake. And so we have to differentiate these sort of things. You'll find the same sort of thing in some sects of Christianity do the rosary, like the Catholics. And you will repeat a phrase over and over again. You can get so good at repeating this phrase that it just becomes one single vowel that comes out. And again, it creates a state of auto-hypnosis. The difference is that because you actually understand what you're saying with the phrase, it will tend to program you a little bit. You're basically when you do something like rosary, you're giving yourself a post-hypnotic suggestion. Not a bad one. It's certainly not going to hurt you. But again, it is not being awake. Can anybody think of any other forms of meditation that you've learned?
Yeah, so Mr. Keem has a question. He asks, Is there any difference with zikr?
Yes. Zikr is usually not open-ended. So if I give you a Zikr practice, I'm going to say, take this thing and recite it 99 times. And that's not long enough to really go into a trance. And because you will also know exactly what you're saying, you will be able to focus on it. And it's it's the auditory version of using a symbol to gaze at, like the diagram meditation.
Mm.
So the diagram meditation is a visual zikr, and a verbal zikr is a kind of auditory diagram instead of a visual diagram. And it's not done in such a way that is conducive to going into trance.
What if it's like 501 repetitions?
By the time you get to where I would give you 501 repetitions, I would know that you could stay out of trance for that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now, part of this, and this is an interesting thing about the mind, is that the mind has thoughts.
Oh my God.
Those
No.
thoughts have weight. And usually, and this is a funny thing, in most people's minds, you will think 6 negative thoughts for every positive thought you think, on an average. There's some science behind this. You know, right now I have Stanford just over the hill, and they do a lot of the mind research on this sort of stuff. So one of the things that Zikr will do when you are doing it correctly is it will force you to not have the negative thoughts. And trust me on this, not having negative thoughts is good for you. Having positive thoughts is healthy. There's an immutable law of the universe that most people don't know. And I'm going to give it to you right now. Y'all might want to write this down. And it is, what you think is what you get. Thoughts have a kind of magnetic field to them, a gravitational pull. And so if you are focused entirely on the negative, you will be drawn to the negative. If you're focused entirely on the positive, you'll be drawn to the positive. This is not magic. It's not any kind of esoteric woo-woo stuff. It's just, this is what your mind will sort for. So the more positive input you give yourself, the happier your mind is. So, why would we want to meditate? This is not a rhetorical question. Feel free to answer. Why would we want to meditate?
Better capacity to use your mind to either observe what's going on or to focus on what you think about.
Yeah, that's a good reason. Why else?
If you pay enough attention, you begin to find out what your mind is like.
Yeah, that can be depressing sometimes, but
Well,
it's
yeah.
true. What else? Come on, Ilmar, I know you have an answer.
Well, it also depends a little bit on the form of the meditation you're doing. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, for example, body scan I consider kind of a form of meditation, and
Yeah.
there the effect is kind of unblocking energies. You know, and you know that's and coming to know what those blockages there are, and that I consider to be, you know, a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we had not touched on body scan meditations, which are in the same class usually as the diagram meditations. They allow you to focus and actually listen to what your body is saying to you. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I think there's something especially good about ground, that it tends to ground one more, you know, into the body. Because I think it's some of these meditations I've engaged in tend to kind of almost get you out of the body, whereas that kind of tends to ground you, you know, which is useful, I think, also, because I think you need both, you know.
Yeah, that's very important, and one of the reasons that we only do the meditations that we do is because they all ideally keep you grounded. I think a meditation that ungrounds you is of dubious value. So here's something, and this goes to Enneagram work and the Enneagram of the chief feature. So your chief feature creates what are called emotional set points. And you can think of this, and there's some science behind this too. I wish I had made all of this stuff up myself, but I haven't. I've stole it from all of the best places. So on one end, you have a set point of depression. This is how depressed you can get. On the other end, you have happiness, joy, the pleasurable, the comfortable, and this is how happy you can get. By the time you're about 12 years old, these points are set, and under normal circumstances, they do not change. There are only a couple of things that can change them according to science. The set point for unhappiness can be lowered under a couple of different circumstances. Poverty and chronic unemployment will lower it, and the death of a child will lower it. And we find that to be very, very interesting. We've only found one thing that I know of so far that will raise the upper limit of your set point, the set point for happiness, and that is consistent access to altered states. And this is not to say that, oh, I drop acid, I feel better. It'll reset my set point. Maybe it will, but what has to happen is you have to access altered states on a very regular basis, and then you have to do the work that those altered states bring out for you. You have to do the emotional work, and this will raise your set points. There's all sorts of examples of this in meditative work. We also know that proper meditation changes the brain. And
can you give us one of those examples so I have a clear idea what you've got in mind when you say raising the set point here?
I think that's a good idea, yeah.
Yeah. So let's say my normal set point on a scale of 1 to 10 is 5. I'm never terribly happy. And then I start doing a lot of meditation work, the kind that in this case, we'll say the void practice, because I know the void practice does this. I start doing the void practice every day. And the void practice begins to open some things up. It gives me altered perceptions of the world. And that allows me to confront some stuff inside myself, which I then get to work on using, self-observation, self-remembering, all of these things that are a part of this. And over time, that will raise my ability to experience happiness. I know there's a couple of big papers out of Stanford that talk about this, and I think one out of Princeton. I was digging them up earlier today, but so there's an example of that.
Well, Nancy offers a thought, and she says, one more that raises the happiness set point from what she's seen is if a person has gender dysphoria and then changes to their preferred gender, they become noticeably happier.
I don't think that we have enough data yet to say if that is entirely accurate. I think that if we had a society where that was more accepted, it would definitely be true. But one thing I've noticed with my trans friends, and I have several, is that they discover that changing to the correct sex for them doesn't solve their problems. They still have all the same problems, they just have a different gender.
I just have a few samples myself. It just seemed like they became stably happier.
I have seen the exact opposite. And a lot of that might not have anything to do with changing the way they express their gender per se, but some of the things that you have to go through with that, I think, can make you crazy. I had one friend who went completely Looney Tunes because their hormones were so unbalanced from they were a female to male transition.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were mainlining testosterone weekly.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, they were dealing with all their body producing all of the female hormones because they did not have the wherewithal to get their ovaries removed. And it made them nuts, downright psychotic. And so this is an area that's so new, I don't know that we can say anything about it. I also know people who have transitioned and have been just amazingly happier. Depressions that they've dealt with their whole life have gone away. So it's hard to say.
Okay. The ones who I know were male to female, so maybe that's easier.
In some ways, I think it is. I think that female to male, it has not been worked on as long or as well. But yeah, it will be interesting as data collects to see what's true about that. I think that, like I said, under the right circumstances where societal pressures have been removed, it could very much be a happier thing.
Omar shared some data with us that we can, it might take some time to get through that, but we can follow up on it later for sure.
Yeah, and all of this is anecdotal, I probably know more trans people than a lot of people, but that's still just a handful. So it's hard to say. I would like to think that it's true.
The survey data, at least from that article, which is a pretty comprehensive survey of the literature in this area, seems to suggest that there's haven't been really any really good studies on this, but that the studies that have been there suggest that there is an increase in happiness. I think they only studied male to female transitions. But there were some other issues with it that made them apparently, in some cases, more susceptible to. Well, no, I won't even go that far because I don't remember it well enough. So, but anyway, it suggests that there's some increase in happiness, but nothing that significant.
Yeah. I think it's going to be another 20 years before we can really say anything definitive on this. But fingers crossed.
Yeah, and even if it's true, it's not something available to very many people.
Nope. So what is available to everybody is altering your consciousness. achieving altered states of consciousness is a step towards moving the emotional set points. And meditation is one of the ways to do this. It's a good way. And it's one that can't be taken away from you. I'm pretty much convinced that psychedelic teacher plants will do the same thing when used correctly, but governments can outlaw those. Meditation cannot be outlawed because there's no proof that you can do it or you are doing it. I mean, unless they put you under a fMRI and measure your brain waves and stuff and see what's going on. One of the interesting things about meditation is that it lowers the trigger point for the amygdala. Y'all know what the amygdala is? It's a chunk of your brain that is involved with threat. It's actually, it is stimulated by novelty, anything new in the environment, but it's presupposed to see threat above everything else. And meditation over a relatively short amount of time will destimulate the amygdala so that you will not be quite as threatened by everything. Which is kind of important because y'all know that it has been demonstrated a couple of times out of Harvard, the last report I saw, that people with strong conservative bents have large overactive amygdalas, which means they're scared all the time. They're threatened by everything.
So it involves a sense of like psychological and emotional reactivity then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that to what extent is that being caused by fear mongers? In other words, I wonder, does it, are people with large amygdalas susceptible to fear or more susceptible to fear, or is it that fear mongering creates larger amygdalas and thus?
That's a very good question to which I do not have a very good answer. It's one of those chicken or egg sort of things. I suspect that people who have larger, more active amygdalas are going to be way more susceptible to fear mongering. And remember, what you think is what you get. If I can get you to focus on your fears all the time, your amygdala is going to develop because what you practice, you get better at. And if you practice fear, and if you practice paranoia, and if you practice feeling threatened, you'll get really good at doing that. You will see fears and threats everywhere.
So do we need autopsies of a lot of Trump followers as compared to?
You don't even have to do an autopsy. You can see this with an MRI. And that's basically what they did at Harvard, was that they did MRIs of people who self-identified as conservative, people who self-identified as liberal. And they noticed that this was basically the case across the board. Conservatives have larger amygdalas and more active. And this gets into another classification of people.
Yeah, Nancy says at least some fundamentalist Christians are afraid of meditation.
Yep. Which is kind of funny because meditation has been a tradition within the Christian church for 1,000 years or more.
And Marcelo chimes in, says, yes, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses are basically afraid of everything. That's why they don't want their kids to go to school, because they're afraid of knowledge. They don't want to have contact with any kind of thoughts outside of their own. Yeah. Funny story. When I was young, people would come to the door all the time and try and convert me into this and that. And because I was young and ornery, I would let them try. I would talk with them, and I had Mormons come in and give me their Be a Mormon lessons. And I had these Jehovah's Witness guys come in. This one guy in particular, he would come over and he would try and convert me, and I would talk to him. And I finally one night got him drunk. And the next week, he didn't come back. Some old guy showed up and said, a very conservative fellow. And I asked what happened to the other guy, and they sent him back to the factory. Yeah, they sent him back to they have somewhere in the Midwest, this big place where they train their missionaries, and they sent him back for reconditioning because he started questioning things.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with meditation.
Where were we?
Where were we?
You're going to say there's a principle or an idea that you were going to touch on.
Could be, and I'll probably get myself back to it, but I realized that I didn't talk about the third kind of meditation that we do yet.
Oh, okay. So let's backtrack a bit.
Yes, let's backtrack a bit.
Okay,
Third,
Dave has to go. Take care, Dave.
take care, Dave. This is the part that you would really want to hear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
We'll see you
because the third kind of meditation that we do here involves evoking the flow state. And we don't start people off with this because of the three, it's the one that's most dangerous. The reason that it's the most dangerous is because it releases the most dopamine into the system. When you are heavily into a flow state, you have lots and lots of dopamine flowing through your brain. Now, dopamine is the reward hormone, and it is addictive. So you need these other two meditations first to be able to balance out that third and not become a flow junkie. And flow, integrative flow is how I translate the term samadhi. And samadhi is the practice of developing that. And you develop that through a dynamic balance between the other two meditations. It's the third force in meditations. And this gets you up off your butt too, most of the time. You can be sitting here and be in flow. Or you can be moving. And one of the things that some meditation practices stress this, most don't, is meditation within movement. What we like to do here in the circle is to get you moving as quickly as possible. Learn how to do meditations in such a way that you can do them walking down the street, that you can do your meditation while you are riding a bus and sitting, while you can do your meditation anywhere while doing anything, and that you can push yourself into a flow state whenever you need it. And that has a lot of benefits. So when you practice the sharp focus, the broad focus, and the flow together, this is the great practice that they talk about in the Yoga Sutras, the samyama. And that's pretty much what we aim for.
Can you expand on that? But when you say you practice them together, are you alternating between a sharp
Nope.
focus and a broad focus? Are you somehow in the same act trying to do both?
It's more like in the same act, you're kind of trying to do both.
Okay, can you go a little more further into that and kind of describe that a bit more?
So the Yoga Sutras tell us that this, you develop this, the concentration, the absorption, and the integrative flow regarding a single object. And this is the trick to this. You can't do it with too much stuff. It has to be kind of one-pointed. And it's like looking and listening at the same time. Have you ever tried to actually watch someone and listen to them at the same time? Your brain rebels against this. And I know this from years of teaching people how to do this, because if you are going to be a good hypnotherapist, you have to be able to see and hear at exactly the same time. And your brain doesn't want to do that. It wants to do one or the other, and it will fight you for quite a while until you make the breakthrough of being able to hold these two things. So in the same way, the sharp focus and the broad focus have to happen at the same time. They happen with two different parts of your brain. So it can be done, but it's difficult. And the flow state actually turns down the prefrontal cortex. And when these three things happen together, I mean, we have this mapped out in the brain where it all happens. The temporal lobe is involved in the broad focus stuff. The parietal lobe and the temporal parietal junction are involved in the sharp focus stuff. And the prefrontal cortex is involved with flow. And it's sort of like, I think of it as tuning an instrument, because you're getting the vibrations to be in harmony with each other when we're talking about brainwave as vibration. And it's interesting because up until 20 years ago, we had no way to talk about this scientifically. And so your meditation teachers would just say, just do this. It'll do something. What it'll do. We can't describe it. We don't have words for it, but do it. You'll like it. And now we can describe it. Doesn't make it any easier. But at least we kind of have a sense of one of the things that's going on inside of your head that's producing these states, that you are auto-tuning your own brain.
I guess what I'd like to hear, I don't know if you're willing to go there, but is a description of how you go about in a particular case of both having a sharp focus and the broad focus. I mean, can you give me a concrete description of what you're doing and what's happening when you're doing that?
I get there frequently when I'm fencing.
Okay.
And I can tell you what it looks like is that I'm aware of everything in the room.
Okay.
And I'm specifically aware of the space around my opponent. And as my opponent moves, he gives me the sharp focus. He's my sharp focus, and his moving through the space is the broad focus that comes together. And when I can turn off my internal chatter and push myself into a flow state, let go of my sense of self and let this happen, I win the matches a lot, because I see what my opponent is going to do before they do it. Because the sharp focus ripples into the broad focus, and allows the flow state to perceive what's happening.
Okay. Makes sense. And this is happening for you simultaneously. You're
Simultaneously, yeah.
focusing on the opponent and also aware of the space around your opponent, basically.
Yes.
Yes.
And turning off my sense of limited individuality.
Right.
So you don't have an inner monologue saying,
There's
okay,
no inner monologue.
Yeah.
It's think of it as if you were a primordial shark sensing everything around you through the currents of the water against you. At this point, to describe it, I have to move into the poetic, because there is not words for this, which is very frustrating. We need words for this.
Mm. But I can see how that would give you the upper hand against an opponent who is working from that place of, okay, he's doing this, I'm going to do this, because then they're slowed down by that mental activity that isn't so instinctually oriented.
Yeah, if I can get my opponent to think while I'm in this state, I almost always win. And I beat people who I shouldn't be able to beat because they're like half my age and highly skilled and all of this sort of stuff. But it's a matter of just being able to hit a state where I model reality more efficiently than they do. And I can respond without thought. And I know that this is vague, and it's frustrating to me to not be able to talk about it more clearly. I'm constantly looking for new language to be able to describe this. Because the old language is metaphoric and poetic and does not lend itself to the kind of discourse I want to create around this. So keep asking questions, because you might help me figure this shit out.
I mean, your martial arts example, I think, is a very clear example, and it has the advantage that you get this immediate feedback as to whether you win the match or not. I mean, in a weird sort of sense, there's something similar that goes on, say, in Tango. I mean, there's this focused awareness of my partner, and yet also a broad awareness of the surrounding space. So so I don't run into anybody, and I don't, but there's not immediate feedback of getting, stabbed or not stabbed, and that's what you get.
Yeah, but I think that you would find the same thing in dance, say in tango, because you're building this neurological connection with your partner, right? So that basically you form a joint neurology, and that's your sharp focus. And then you have all of the space that you have to move through, and all of the other bodies moving around you. Right. And that's your broad focus. Right,
exactly.
And if you turn off your mind and go into flow, then you've got the exact same circumstances without having to stick anybody with a sword.
And you got the benefit of a beautiful lady in your arms, which is not to be scorned.
Which is not bad either. Yes.
Primordial shark tango.
Yes, primordial shark tango. So, David, what do you think? You're a dancer. Talk to us about dance in this state. Or not. I'm always putting him on the spot.
That's what we do here. Put people on the spot. If anyone else has any questions.
I can see his lips moving, but he's muted. David, are you
muted, David? There you go. So, yeah. What were you saying? Sorry about that.
I was saying that seeing myself respond and not really knowing that I'm actually going to go somewhere, but the person who I'm dancing with is also going there. You don't really get to know where you're going, but it all happens, and everything is balanced and you stay upright, or you don't fall over each other in contact improv or something.
Yeah.
Primordial shark contact improv then. Yes. Oops.
Crash.
Sorry.
Okay, any more questions, thoughts?
What are you thinking about, Nancy?
Well, part of it is Bruce Francis's Taoist meditation, where it's a lot more specific than body scan because you're looking for any spot that's blocked, and then you have a process for releasing it.
Yeah, that's like body scan on steroids.
Yeah, even more so than what I said.
Yeah, I'm familiar with how he does it, and it's in the same class. It's just highly sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
What was that name? I want to make sure that I heard it.
Bruce
Oh,
Francis.
Francis. I'll write it down.
Yeah,
Sure.
write it down because yeah, he's a Tai Chi Bagua Xingyi teacher over in the North Bay in San Francisco area.
No, he's moved to Colorado.
Oh, he's moved to Colorado.
He has a physical center now. He's really happy.
Ah,
Oh, there
good.
you go. Thanks, Nancy. Bruce Francis, yeah.
Yep, been around a long time.
So Marcelo asks, do you have examples of the 3 kinds of practices on the previous talks? I know
Yes.
that he hasn't been around.
That's
this
right,
whole
you
time,
haven't been
so.
around. So if you go to the YouTube, some of the earlier talks, we addressed some of that. I'm trying to remember. There's a talk on self-observation, self-remembering, and self-witnessing, which will give you some ideas of that. There is the void practice, which is floating around somewhere. I will have to look and see where we put it. I know that that's not on YouTube.
Yeah.
But stick around and you'll get the practices.
Yay. Yes, definitely.
What would be handy would be to have a, a PDF or a sheet that essentially, describes both your focus practice and your void practice. And,
Funny you should mention that, because for the last couple of days, I've been getting this itching sensation to write a small booklet that contained the basic practices of the circle. If only I had an editor to work with me.
We'll
Because
find you one.
Yeah, I think that is actually an idea whose time has come. So the book of practices will be showing up who knows when, but sooner rather than later, preferably not posthumously.
well, you're no longer in Oakland, so you should be fine for a while.
Well, it's I actually find that to be the case. Just the lack of Oakland was stressful. Living in East Oakland was extremely stressful, and I didn't realize it until I got out of there. But there was my amygdala was on its toes the whole time. So. All right. So, if there are no more questions, you know what time it is.
I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
With the meditation, what's the difference, or how would you recommend, like, the amount of time you do it for? I was thinking that you could either start with a long period of time and you would get used to it, or you could
That answer is going to be different for every single person.
mhm.
There is not a stock answer for that. It depends on the needs of the individual. So for you, for instance, I would start with very short amounts of time as opposed to long amounts of time for the meditative practices. I would change that when you are moving your body as opposed to sitting still. That would be where you would begin to draw meditative states out. I have a feeling that if I started you out with, oh, I want you to meditate for an hour a day, the next thing I know, I'm going to be getting a note from your family going, David is sitting in a state of Satori and he hasn't blinked in 3 days. And I don't want to get in trouble. So. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good question though, because this goes back to the understanding that we have that there is no cookie cutter knowledge. There is no cookie cutter path. There is no one size fits all enlightenment. Each person's path is going to be unique and it needs to be designed for them and them alone.
We've all got our quirks, guys.
We all got our quirks. And what I would give to, say, Noor as a practice would not be what I would give to Ilmar as a practice. It would not work. Yeah, or vice versa. So this is one of the interesting things about the work as it stands, and the difference between the real work, as I like to think of it, and the illusionary work. The illusionary work is one size fits all. Yeah, here, sit here, chant Hare Krishna, the universe will get better. You'll get better. You'll be happier. Chant Hare Krishna. That's all you need to do. Or here, hold these 2 soup cans.
Oh, God. I live in LA. We can't joke about these things. Just
yeah.
What is that a reference to?
That's a reference to Scientology. It's an oblique reference because who knows, they may be spying on us.
Yeah, I used to live down the street from the Scientologists. Now I live down the street from the Hare Krishnas. So
yeah, they make better food.
The whole family's here.
So, commercials.
Ah, yes.
It is the new month, and
Yep.
we are gleefully seeking donations to keep the school running. You will find a link to that on the Nine-Sided Circle forum. All donations are gratefully received, and every month we raffle off something cool. Last month was a t-shirt, the month before that was a book, the month before that was a book, and on and on and on like that. And this month, what you get, if you should win the raffle, is you get to pick either me or Noor and get an hour consultation with one of us.
Yep. That's what we're doing this month.
That's what we're doing.
Yep.
And you also get access to the secret talks, which I have to tell you are really getting to be pretty darn good. Because what the secret talks are is that Noor and I are working on material that is mostly for her, but you get to look over her shoulder or over my shoulder, depending on who's doing what to whom.
But yes, so everyone who donates gets access to that, and everyone who donates gets
Your name goes into the
automatically,
hat.
yeah, exactly. You're automatically put in the raffle to win the hour this month. So
So,
both of those things.
so donate.
Anything else?
Yep. We have coming up the new Enneagram class,
Yes.
which some of you have asked to be in, and some of you have not yet asked to be in, and we have 10 spaces total. And what I'm going to ask all of you to do, if you want to be in it, is to either private message me on Facebook or email me. Give me something in writing that says you want to do it, because as soon as I've collected up the names, we will negotiate a time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll do it, because I'm excited about this.
Yeah, so it's important to make sure you let us know that you want to be part of that so that you can be part of the decision-making process.
Yes.
Because you don't want to miss out if you're interested, so.
And yeah, we want everybody to be in it, but we can only handle about 10 people. So it's kind of first come, first serve. Some people have already served, but there's probably 5 spaces open.
Mm-hmm.
And it is free. We are not charging money for this. The only thing that we ask is that you participate in it live, like you're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And the only requirement is that you are a member of the forum, and that, you know, you don't even have to come to the talks to do it. You just have to be a member of the forum.
Yes.
So, and this is going to be on the Enneagram of Process. It's going to be a bit like the first thing that I did with Steve Barnes, but instead of being very, very general, it's going to be much more focused on using the Enneagram as a tool for process. So do this. We want you. Yeah, join us. And what else have we got? Donate money, join us on the Enneagram. There must be more. Oh yeah, speaking of the Enneagram, there's always the Ultimate Enneagram, which I haven't mentioned in a while, but I should, because it's a very good course. It was the thing that started the school. My friend Steve basically nagged me into doing this with him for like over a year. And I finally did, and I realized that, yeah, I should be doing this. Don't tell him I said he was right.
So that's at theultimateenneagram.com, right?
Yep, ultimateenneagram.com.
Okay, so just ultimateenneagram.com.
Yep.
Okay.
And that thing costs money because of reasons. So
I think that's it for this week. In terms
that's it for this week.
Promos and commercials and all that boring stuff.
Yep. That's why we save it for the end.
Yeah. All right. Guess that about wraps it up.
That wraps it up. So I am going to stop the recording and say goodbye and